I must say that everything changed um, during this time. My father had been a teacher, and so it meant he was a person, one of the educated people in the community. But after this, he could never get his job back. So and he had already lost everything. So he had to move to work in the city as a boy. He had to work for a white man, and that was the only job available for him. So he actually had to leave his family behind, and the family was just aching at living because they had been uprooted from their own land. She used to explain that it's because some white man or a chief had been murdered, and so when the British came in, they literally swept the whole village, and we never returned to that place again. My father at that time was picked as probably one of the murderers or suspected murderers. We never saw him, my siblings never saw him again until maybe much later, like 3 years or something. Now, my group, the Kikuyus, never had, they used to rule through a council of elders. There wasn't a chief, there wasn't a king or anything. But when the British came in, they began to elevate some people for no other reason than they wanted to divide and rule. So people like Mishuki's father, they were made the chief. So he became the chief of the community, and once you're made the chief, then you come with all the privileges that the chief has to enjoy. And so that's how Mishuki ended up, even after all the atrocities he had committed, he's still very rich. In fact, in my village, we call him Kemedero, which is the houses had been burned down. So he had to go through the process of trying to rebuild his life again. And so my parents lost their livelihood. They lost their land, and they lost their sense of dignity, because a former teacher now going to work as a servant in a white man's home, that is not what he was destined to do. The whole Mau Mau people have always been branded as terrorists. They have never been said for exactly what they were trying to do, which was really going after the land that was taken away from them. Coffee plantations, pyrethrum, sisal, and all that was taken from us. And when we came to claim it, the brutality that the British brought in that country, they were put in a camp. They were put in a temporary camp where my mother and other women were made to dig deep trenches around the village so that they could not be feeding the Mau Mau. So then they would put barbed wires. So the camp literally was a place where they were housed, all the children, everybody in the same room, and very little food, because the land which people used to till before had been taken. So it was really excruciating poverty throughout that period that there was that little camp. And we still own the little plot where where we had built our little shack. Basically, my mother says that, especially after he was detained 2 times, that he came out a sick man, and his life was never the same again, and he died early. He died a young person, and maybe those are the pressures that he had to go through when all the atrocities that he had to endure when he was in detention. So when I read the book and it began to talk about all the detention centers in the country, then it dawned on me, then that is where my father was. That's where he was providing cheap labor for the British, because that's what now Caroline was explaining in the book, that when those men were taken away and they were put in those detention camps, that is practically what they were going there to do. Betty dismissing what we had experienced as not important, to me, is racist. What Betty Kaplan and other British writers what they were saying is that so long as the brutality was happening on the Africans, it's not brutality, it's not war crime. I think I was really upset by what she termed as the British civilizing mission. When you provide a hierarchy, you kind of provide the class system that they understood, the way we understood it from the British, from the king coming downwards. So this was their own creation, which was not there previously. So basically, Mishuki had a hand in everything that happened because it was him who ended up being the biggest beneficiary of what had happened in our region. He's still a minister, he's still a cabinet minister. He has been an MP in my constituency for nearly 30 years or more, or since I can remember. And the reason is he's also one of the richest people in the country because he inherited not just the office of the DC, but also the money and the privileges that came with it. So right now he's very rich, and so when it comes to during campaigns, he's the one who is able to buy more votes directly, bribery votes and everything, because he has the money to do that. The stories that we tell, the stories that my grandmother tells, has not been believed even by some of the communities in Kenya, because he used to castrate men. And so that Kemedero is having clippers. Her critique was that Caroline had relied on stories, first-hand stories, from the people who had gone through the process for maybe 10 years earlier. So she claimed that they had decayed memory, for instance, because it didn't have the official documentation. So it's really nice that now we have official validation of the personal experiences that people have been talking about for years. They have been pushing to have these documents released. As a matter of fact, the people, they are actually for people who are kind of the face of everybody else, because these are 4 men who can document, they were there, they can document their personal experiences of what happened during that time. And they have always been dismissed. Of course, the British have been able to successfully dismiss the case because there is no official record of that. It's only their personal experiences. So having these documents out now is the best thing that is going to support the case. And they have been asking for repatriation. They have been asking for, at least for this to be acknowledged publicly so that people can know what really happened.